Well, hello, everyone. It's Chris French here from Workhuman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Customer Strategy, here as your host for this session, Reinvigorating Your Culture Through Your Return to Workplace Strategy. And I have two amazing guests with me here today to talk a little bit about what their organizations are doing to think about bringing employees back to the workplace. We definitely have had a lot of challenges over the last year if you're an HR executive, and now we're also all challenged with reinventing what the new workplace looks like. And at least we have some two leading thinkers here with us who can talk a little bit about the biggest areas of friction that they and their employees are going through to manage this change. Balancing the accommodation of flexibility without compromising productivity and the needs of the business. And so we have some really exciting insights for you today. So please join me in a welcome to Andrew Davis, the Executive Vice President and Global Chief Human Resources Officer of Sony Music, and Patricia Frost, the Chief Human Resources Officer of Seagate Technology. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And these are really important topics that we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think, this is definitely a challenge that every organization is dealing with. And Patricia, maybe before we sort of dive into sort of some of the challenges, et cetera, it would be helpful for people. One of the things that's come up in every discussion about this is that it kind of depends on the type of employees that you have. Like, I was talking to the chief human resources officer of a hospital system, and so that challenge of creating a safe working environment for employees is different than, let's say, a financial services organization, or in your case, a technology organization. And it might be helpful to just take an opportunity to talk about the kind of employee groups that you have at Seagate Technology, so that your answers have some context for our listeners.
I think that's really important because every company is different. And so their approaches are going to be different. So for Seagate Technology, we are a manufacturing technology company. And so we have from our, what I call manufacturing specialists at our factory, to our design centers, our sites where those individuals have been able to work remotely. And then, of course, we have your typical G&A type functions. So it's really been from one extreme to the next to ensure that the company remains profitable. We've had a large portion of the company that still has to be on site because we still have to produce hard drives. Then we have another portion of the company that some would say have the luxury to be remote workers during the pandemic. So it's really, how are we balancing the needs of the business and keeping every employee safe regardless of the type of work structure that they're in during the pandemic.
And Andrew, for Sony Music, can you talk a little bit about your workforce there, please?
Yeah, happy to. We have operations in over 60 countries throughout the world. And our primary operations here in the U.S. is in New York. Our workforce is made up of, mainly creatives, obviously in the business of music. That's our bread and butter. But we also have, obviously, other disciplines within our functions: marketing, IT, human resources, all the standard disciplines that you would expect, which makes for a very diverse workforce as we think about, working from home and the hybrid workforce that we're going into.
Right. And so those are two completely different, when you were talking about those groups, very different scenarios. So what do you anticipate will be the biggest sources of friction with whatever it is that you decide makes sense for Seagate going forward, if you're bringing people who are remote now back to the office, et cetera, or if you let them stay remote and then your on-site workers are like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, what do you see as the biggest sources of friction for your organization?
So as we go, people say new normal. I would say it's next normal because we're a global company, and how we transition is, we could say we have global standards with regional execution. So I see the largest challenge we have is employee expectation with business requirements. And now we have to be very clear as what do we require as a business, And then how do we also meet employee needs, especially with that population that has had afforded the opportunity to be remote, and we're bringing them back safely on site. So with our on-site workforce, they during the height of the pandemic, they were saying, please stay away because they had their work bubble and they knew what it was safe with that group that they were always working with on shift. So we are going to do a very slow, next normal as we bring different communities back into our sites and really continue to operate with an abundance of caution as we go forward. But really having that, business requirement with employee expectation understood. I think the physical constraints are very easy to address as people reconfigure office space. You look at sanitation. I think the true challenge is the psychological and emotional stability that we want for our workforce. Because every individual has had their own COVID journey, and we don't know personally how it's affected them and where are there maybe insecurities of coming back, because not everyone can get vaccinated. That's not 100%. So really understanding the needs of your workforce and then doing that balance, I think, is going to be challenging, not just for human resources, but for every people leader, every people manager.
Yeah, that whole concept of understanding the impact on different groups of people in a way that it's not possible to predict for every individual person. And Andrew, one of the things that we've talked about is that at Sony Music, you have a lot of creative types, a lot of a completely different type of population. Let me ask you from your perspective the same type of question. Where do you see the opportunities for, or the challenges and frictions that are likely to come with moving people around to this new workplace?
I think other than the challenges that most will face, which is how to make sure our workplace is safe for a return to work, I think our unique challenge will be being able to make sure that we have the right mix of employees who need to be in the office in order for us to do the work of creating music with the personal needs of our employees. I think there's going to be some tension there. And for us, we've got to try to find the right balance between the needs of the employees, the needs of the business, and the needs of our client. I think that's where we'll find our challenge.
And many organizations have different ways and different approaches for identifying what the, let's say, sources of friction are for their employees now, for the business, et cetera, whether that's surveying people or focus groups, et cetera. What types of things are you doing at Sony Music to try to understand where those likely sources of friction will come from?
Yeah, we're also doing the standard approaches of surveys, listening to our employee base, having a good understanding of what we're hearing through just conversations with managers and what have you. We also have assembled a cross-functional team in different levels in the organization that allows for them to also, give us the voice of the employees, so to speak, and that's been very helpful. I think it's really important for us that we continue to listen, because we've seen over the last couple of months that some of those needs have shifted as different pieces have occurred over the last few months here in terms of vaccinations and what the CDC is saying. We're also doing a lot of benchmarking with our industry colleagues, other Sony Music affiliates, trying to understand from them what are the needs from their employee base, so that we can try to triangulate that for a good response, and making sure that the workforce, as they come back, we've met most of the needs for that, knowing that we can't meet every single individual needs, but by having a look at different organizations, I think that also helps us as well.
Well, thank you for that, Andrew. Patricia, same question to you.
Right. So we started a new work structure program in which it is top down driven. So we're looking at business need by CEO direct report and really deep diving into each function as to what are the business requirements to have, the optimal productivity for that function. And so is that on-site? Is that hybrid? Is that a telecommuter, or is that a business traveler? You think of a sales representative. And then we're communicating that at all different levels. And we've literally surveyed down to by name employee as to what is best for the needs of the business. So we're going needs of the business first. And then as we populate that with the individual names, now you're really getting into that employee management of what are the needs of the employee and how can we be flexible? How can we over communicate what we're trying to achieve as a company, but still have that kind of people always that we really value our workforce while meeting those needs. So I would say it's a lot of over communication, and it's a lot of roundtables, a lot of virtual roundtables, so people understand where we are in this process.
One thing I wanted to comment on is obviously you've had some unique experience in your background with an organization that kind of knows a little bit about how to move people around and build teamwork and camaraderie and through massive change and stress and those types of elements. And, maybe it would be great to maybe just share what I'm alluding to, but also like, how is that framed, how you plan to deal with the inclusion and engagement components of this as well, not just the logistics of get where people work and where they'll be sitting, but for that hybrid workforce, like how do you think about inclusion and engagement and connection?
And thank you for that question, because I'm really proud of my service. I served for 32 years in the United States Army. In that role, in that profession of arms that I've now brought to Seagate, and what I learned during those decades is it is what we say in the military, it's mission first, but people always. So you need to understand what is most critical for your company. And we would say in corporate world profitability, but I would also say viability that we've learned during COVID. How can we stay resilient as a company? But you do that in the context of people always. And in the military, your soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guard, they're your most critical asset. They're a valuable asset. And as you recognize that, how do you ensure mission success? Always looking at the value of your workforce. And that's a balance that you always have to measure as you go forward with any program. And I think just understanding flexibility, we say these terms, flexibility, agility, communication. In most of the units that I served in the military, we were not all co-located. So what are those practices and how you actually set up and execute a meeting? I always say virtual first, always making sure those that are not physically in the room are recognized first, making sure that you, before you close the meeting, you reach out to those that are virtual first. Because those that are in the room together will have that time when the meeting ends to catch up on something or question that didn't get asked. And then if there is that after meeting that people didn't get to be a part of virtually, who's capturing those notes and making sure that that's transparent and shared? So there are some behaviors that everyone needs to bring back into the workplace because not everyone is going to be able to come back. So what are those, how do you operate virtually? How do you operate in this hybrid environment when you may have a 75, 25, 75% on-site, 25% aren't? And how do you accommodate for that? And then you have to maintain that accommodation and always make sure that you're very aware that they're part of the team going forward.
Right. Excellent. I think we probably could fill hours of learnings from those 32 years of experience on a whole bunch of other items as well. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Now, I think what we should do is stay what works. Do a Teams meeting and put the option of we'll be in conference room A, and then here's the Teams, the Teams or the Zoom's link for you to join virtually if you're not in the office. So I think we can actually draft off what's working right now, and we're also making sure too that when it's possible that we're rotating teams in and out depending on how you're working your phased approach. It's important that you have time for everyone to come in where possible, so they can still feel connected to the organization, to the culture, to your team. So I think it's going to be a matter of coaching, training, reminding managers that it's important that we keep everyone involved. I think the inclusive mindset is going to be critical for the success of a hybrid workforce.
As you head down this journey, how do you plan to monitor and assess the effectiveness of the approaches? Like, is this working or not? Are there measures, or are there key things that you're looking at to give you cues? Oh, this is working, but this isn't working.
So we've talked about doing pulse surveys as employees are coming back to work. And for us too, specifically, what we've decided to do for what most companies are calling either wave one or the first phase, is that we're going to actually have our employees, the only employees that's going to come into that phase will be employees who want to volunteer to come into the office. We think that's going to be a very important group. We don't want to call them a pilot group because we don't want to pilot a safe return, but we want to call that group, that can help us understand what is working and what isn't. And so that's going to be a really important baseline for us, a barometer for us going into returning more people into the office later on in the year or whenever that makes sense for our business. So that's going to be one piece. I think ongoing, we'll keep things like we have a committee right now that focuses on all COVID related issues, including our return to work protocols and safety measures. And so we're going to continue to keep that committee in play and use them as a sounding board, decision making body to help us make sure that we're doing the right things for our employees. We'll certainly, as I mentioned, do pulse surveys along the way, but we also want to look at things like, where we can measure productivity, measure overall engagement of how people are feeling, and just look at the numbers in terms of overall, are we as productive as we were last year? I mean, I think even looking at things like KPIs will be important for us to measure whether or not this is working. Whether you look revenue, profit, the basic things will still be a barometer, I think, on if this is working. Ultimately, the turnover, right? How are we retaining our talent during that window? Are we seeing a mass exit because of our process? So there are a lot of metrics that we can track, and we plan to do those things all along the way before we get to some kind of new normal.
And there's so much talk. People kind of understand the concept of remote employees. There were people that were in that mode before, and they understand the concept of what resident employees or on-site employees, because we had that before. It's this hybrid that is the thing that's a little bit new for a lot of organizations. And do you think that hybrid workforce, and I'll start with you, Patricia, do you think that will endure at your organization, and why or why not?
I think in many companies it will have to. It will at Seagate. You can't take the genie and try to put the genie right back into the bottle, because there's a different expectation. But I also think our employees have gone through this COVID journey, and there's many things that they're dealing with their own lives and how they're trying to balance. So we want to be as flexible, but I think it still goes back to identify the function, identify the needs of that function. Where can you have flexibility? So we will have hybrid, but does the employee understand what hybrid means as well? That means at Seagate, you may not have dedicated office space. That means you may not have a place that you can nest. It means you may have to go onto a software app and secure yourself a desk that you only use for the day that you're in the office. You don't get to have it both ways. Many companies can't afford to just have offices that sit empty because the hybrid worker isn't at work that day. So it just depends on how your company is going to execute it and what is feasible for them, because it is a capital expense.
Excellent. And just building on what Patricia said there, same question to you, Andrew, is do you think, at Sony Music that this hybrid workforce will endure?
I think what the pandemic has done is shot put us 25 years into the future as it relates to our workforce. We would never want to have a pandemic be the driving force behind that. Obviously, it's been a devastating thing for the world. However, it is what it is at this point. And so I think by accelerating our workforce into this new environment, I think we've all gotten a taste of it. I think the employees now are in the chair. I think employees who have now seen the benefit of taking probably a little bit more personal time in terms of the whole work-life balance piece, if there's such a thing as work-life balance. I think the work-life integration now of work and home, people have seen the benefits of that. I can actually spend time with my children and my family, what have you. They've made now the choice that that's gonna be the life for me that I want to take right now. And I think the employees are in the chair, the driver's seat for this. And if we don't respond to the new workforce and their needs, then we're going to not only lose current talent, we won't be able to attract and retain new talent. So for us, the proposition is simple. We've got to find a way to make sure that hybrid is here to stay for us, and we find a good mix that works for our company and still allows for us to do the work we do.
Yeah, that's such a great lead in to sort of summarizing the time that we've had here today, which is that, listen, 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 understand what's going on. But the genie's out of the bottle. We've got an opportunity here for change and a new way to create in a workplace. And I think that if we look at it as an opportunity, and but we listen to our people and we understand what we need to make our business work, then we can kind of, for our own organizations, come up with a plan that we know will change over time as long as we're listening, 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 and we understand what do we need for the business and what do human beings need to be at work. Then at least we know we'll be on the right path. So I do want to say thank you to Andrew and Patricia for a wonderful, wonderful session. And as I always say at the end of these, stay safe, stay connected, and thank you very much for your time.